It is Saturday, March 16th, 2013, and today's screenshot of the day comes from Liana of the Balmung server. It's quite a scenic view. Good morning, Eorzea. Now Celestine here, and we have a little bit of news today, as well as a special guest. So, without any further ado, let's dive right into the meat and potatoes of today's show. Starting off, there was a developer's blog post showing off some Magtech-y goodness. Go check that out in the description below. Looks like they're showing off not only just a couple of Magtechs, but in what looked like a Garlean base, but it also showed a Lalafell riding one. I'm personally interested in this. I believe they mentioned before they were going to give us a Magtech mount. Maybe this is a little precursor to that. Also, there was recently announced the Eorzean egg decorating contest. This started yesterday at about 3:30 a.m. Eastern Standard and will continue till Monday, April 1st at about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard. If you're interested, you can go and check it out as well. I put the link in the description below, and it gives you all the rules and entry requirements. I might try one myself soon. You never know. Keep an eye out for a Good Morning Eorzea egg. Maybe I'll win some postcards. And last but not least, we actually have a little bit of lore information released. Most of you know Flamin if you've played the Ulda storyline, or any of the storylines involving the Ulda city. There's recently some talk about the lore in regards to the Mikote naming system, and the fact that Flamin seems to kind of contradict a lot of them on both sides. But they came out and said that there is possibilities of both sides actually influencing the character, both from a hereditary standpoint as well as a custom standpoint. They also went on to mention that some of the little features that belong to the Mikote races in particular, such as the slitted or rounded eyes, the longer tails, and the fangs, will be actually able to be interchanged between the races now. So, I finally get my fangs on my Seeker. That's all good for me. So, without any further delay though, I'd like to introduce our guest. Our guest is actually a well-known musician, I would guess is the best way to describe him. He does a lot of work for Pet Food Alpha, he's done some for Aetheryte Radio, and I believe Limit Break Radio as well. Please welcome to my show, DJ Play School.
Hey, how you doing today?
Not too bad. Enjoying your morning?
It's gone fairly well thus far. See how it goes.
Well, welcome to the show. So, I've had the chance to actually play with you in game a little bit, but tell me a little bit about more so that way the guests here and the people listening can more so understand a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, this all started not too long after I started playing an imported version of the PC edition of Final Fantasy XI back in 2003. This was way back on the Final Fantasy XI online forums, Dreams in Vanadale. There were probably a few people that was the go-to place for importers way back in the day. But I remember taking all of the different versions of the Bard song, layering them on top of each other with some software, and then adding a random loop to it just because. And people are like, "Hey, that's kind of cool. You should do some other stuff." And that literally kicked it off. Actually, it's been almost a decade to the month since I started doing like random music production and remixes and stuff with the soundtracks. I've been doing a bit less nowadays now that I'm, out of college and working 9 to 5 or 6 or 7 and so forth. But it's something I've just done off and on as a hobby ever since, just with other games. Specifically the Final Fantasy. I think the thing that I'm most known for is the Final Fantasy stuff I did between 2004 and 2008 mostly. Again, slowed down here recently, but I have been getting myself out there and been working with, as you mentioned, a lot of the other podcasts for 11 and 14, just to really, offer my services, so to speak. I mean, I'm not really charging anybody. Again, this is just a hobby, and I like to keep it recreational. It also gives me some creative freedom because there's like no restrictions really on what I do and how I do it. But it's just something that I've enjoyed for the past decade or so, and I hope to be doing it for a long time moving forward.
Oh, that's definitely a comprehensive history there. So you've been working with music for a little over almost a decade now, probably. Is there any particular songs that you've actually remixed from the Final Fantasy franchise that stuck out with you?
That stuck out with me? Two in particular. I still think the one that came out the best to me was a remix of it's called The Empress's Secret. It's like a drum and bass remix from Jeweled Boughs from the Treasures of Ottergon soundtrack. I think that was the best one I've done. Again, that was like in 2007 or 2008. There was also another one that I did for an album I released in 2008, which is a remix of the Sarata Bharata music from Wings of the Goddess. I think those are the two Final Fantasy XI remixes that I'm most proud of as far as how they came out in general reception.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, you've been listening to a lot of the music in Final Fantasy XI in the first version, as well as some of the clips that Soken-san has actually released through the developer's blog. What are your thoughts of the difference between the two styles?
It's actually, the music in and of itself is sort of a microcosm of the shift in motif for the game in general. So that is actually kind of eye-opening if you listen to it, or if you dare trawl the depths of the beta that's been released. But that one of the main criticisms of Final Fantasy XIV from the original version is that for a lot of people it wasn't quite Final Fantasy enough. This was evident in parts of the kind of the story, the environment that was in. It's like I thought it was pretty Final Fantasy in and of itself, but it was missing a certain feel for a lot of people, and this was also reflected in the music. I really enjoyed the original soundtrack as a whole. It's eclectic, it's all well done, a lot of it's catchy, but a lot of it doesn't mesh well into one another, and there are points where it doesn't really mesh into what's happening on screen. There are parts of it that's a little too electronic, a little too synth heavy. There's parts of maybe a little too rock heavy. It's all over the place, and that works in some respects, and it didn't work in others. And it didn't really convey a lot of Final Fantasy, a lot of the grandiose that comes par for the course for what's supposed to be a Final Fantasy game. With Soken getting on the music, and this became evident as he started contributing tracks for some of the updates and what's already gone into the game prior to the shutdown in the A Realm Reborn process. There's a lot more of that real heavily layered Final Fantasy feel to it. And that's going to come out in spades once more music is revealed in A Realm Reborn. There are a lot more musical aspects, melodies, homages from past Final Fantasies that have been built in. A lot more of the soundtrack as we know it in the beta right now. Actually, the different tracks will share similar themes. There's a lot better pacing, and there's a lot more conveyance of some sort of continuity between the music and what's happening on screen. There's just a lot more. There's just many more layers built on top of it as compared to in the past. It sounds like this is a soundtrack that was specifically made for a Final Fantasy game, and that's really evident. It's actually something. There was an interview with Uematsu, I think in 2011, at some point in time, where he said that when they came to him about the Final Fantasy XIV soundtrack, a lot of what he came up with was, work that was done for other games, for other Final Fantasy games, for other non-Final Fantasy games, and he worked a lot in and around that because Uematsu's a pretty busy guy ever since he actually left Square Enix proper, and formed his own studio and sound group. He's been doing a lot of music for a lot of other games, and I was actually surprised to hear that he was just in Final Fantasy XIV. He just did the whole thing, himself with a little bit of help. But there was a few things missing, just kind of not to say it was like soulless per se, but there just wasn't that feeling that's there for most Final Fantasy games when listening to the music. Moving forward into A Realm Reborn, I think Soken and the Square Enix sound team has really knocked it out of the park from an audio standpoint as far as bringing the Final Fantasy feeling back to the music and really punching it home that you are playing a Final Fantasy game and stuff is going down. And I think that's going to be very, very clearly evident as we move forward into the beta, as more tracks are released, and as the rest of the music comes up, is pulled up, especially once it releases and people get the entire soundtrack and get to listen to it. It's very complete, very, very complete, and I think people will be very pleased with the result.
I know from some of the stuff that I've been listening to, it does sound a lot better. I like how stuff's... It's not so much that it flows better, but I think that, personally, some of the issue was, with the first release, is he created the music by only being given, little information about, what this place looks like or what this place is supposed to be, and not so much who lives here and what's the feeling of this area, or this is what's going on and what's happening this is the feeling that we're trying to bring across. That feeling, I think, is the most important part that was probably not conveyed in the most accurate terms.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a very good point. It does definitely feel like, with Soken and group, that the music is actually much more influenced by the game now. With what's happening, there's a lot more context. I guess that's a good term for it. There's a lot more context to what's happening, and the music really reflects that.
Well, okay. If you could give Square Enix team any suggestions on how they could work with the music a little bit better, just from what you've heard. Obviously, we're both pretty impressed with the soundtrack, but if you could give any advice, what would you do?
There's one thing that has kind of come up more and more in games in general, and that's the idea of dynamic soundtracking, where instead of just, X song plays when X happens, Y song plays when Y happens, this event's happening, so it just kind of moves from one to the other. More along the lines of having the music kind of shift dynamically. It's actually improved a lot. There are some changes that they've made to the different cues for music starting and stopping that's actually kind of cool, but it's missing that kind of dynamism that's in a lot of other games. And just as a small example, in Phantasy Star Online 2, they actually programmed a musical system such that depending on what's happening in the middle, especially things like boss battles, they have separate layers of the music that will come in, come out, and different things will happen dynamically with the action that's on screen, and it adds just a whole other layer of anticipation and excitement to it. So I think something like that might be something they want to investigate, especially, as they move into more emphasis on instance dungeons, more emphasis on special events and raids and things like that. I think trying to work with a more dynamic soundtrack would be a big benefit and would actually be a very, very cool thing to add to the game if possible.
Alrighty. Well, I think that's pretty much all we have for today. I'd like to thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Not a problem. Maybe we can get you back on again a little bit later once there's more music from the beta actually being released. But for now, that's all we have for today's show. As always, you can leave any positive or negative comments in the box below. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter, and I'll put up a link as well to DJ Play School's. Do you have a Twitter account?
Yes, actually, at DJ Play School. That's DJ PLAESKOOL. I don't want to get sued by Hasbro.
Alright, so you can follow DJ Play School on Twitter as well. And if you'd like to leave any suggestions for a topic, if you'd like to be a guest, or if you want to leave a screenshot, you can do so on the official Lodestone topic, or you can send it through YouTube private messaging. This is Nell Celestine, and
this is DJ Play School,
bidding you adieu.